West Virginia has fired head coach Neal Brown. That is the second power conference firing of Sunday. Ryan Walters has also been fired at Purdue. But let's talk this West Virginia job, Ari, because I find it interesting. The Purdue job is a little bit more of a slog because of the Big Ten. West Virginia, even having the season they didn't want to have this season, was still mathematically alive for the Big 12 championship like a week ago.
Yeah. They had a really high hope situation going into
coming off 9 wins last year. Yeah.
You know, Garrett Green, people thought was going to break out. They have maybe one of the best running back tandems in the entire sport. And then, you know, they're losing to Pitt, they're losing to Iowa State, Kansas State, Baylor. I mean, honestly, if you look at their 5 losses or on their schedule here, I'm looking at, they're all pretty okay.
Till the Texas Tech one yesterday.
Yeah. The Texas Tech won 52-15. Pretty rough look, but like losing to Baylor the way they're playing, losing to Kansas State, Iowa State, Pitt at the time, Penn State, like it's just they didn't win any of the games that could have proved the point. But here's the thing about the West Virginia job, because I go back and forth on it. So when I was at the Athletic with you, I used to do a thing that was like just basically a list called the 5.
Right.
Or it was like the 5 so-and-sos that are this or whatever, the 5. And we did the 5 hardest places to recruit to. And West Virginia made my list. Now, this was back in 2020 during COVID when we needed content and there were no games. But the reason why I put West Virginia so low on my list, Andy, was because it was like one of the few teams in college football that doesn't belong geographically in its conference footprint.
Right.
Like, you know, all the teams that they're competing against are relying very much on recruiting Texas and that area of the country.
Now, that's changed as the Big 12 membership.
So that's my point now. It's, you know, how do you perceive West Virginia as a recruiting outfit now that like no conferences make sense?
Well, and there's also another piece of this, because if it's just the NIL era as we've known it for the past 3 years, West Virginia is hopeless. They have no chance, because you're essentially asking your donors to continuously fund this. They don't have as big of a donor base as a lot of the other teams in their conference. It's hard. Like when you have to match dollar for dollar with TCU and Baylor, exactly. Right. But with revenue share coming in, I think that levels the playing field quite a bit.
Because it's a very prideful place. It's a passionate place. Pretty campus, cool stadium, a history of success in the not so distant past, even though we are getting old. You know, we're talking about the Steve Slayton years.
We're gonna talk about a guy from those years pretty soon. So
Pat White. You know, it was a fun time there. Like I feel like their uniforms are badass.
The flying WV,
and they don't like other teams that were on the 5 were like Syracuse, and like that was just in the middle of nowhere.
Although Fran Brown has shown you can win there too.
So maybe there are no hopeless jobs. We should talk about this on a podcast in the offseason.
Yes,
are there any hopeless power jobs anymore?
I don't think so. And especially with revenue share coming in for West Virginia, given the pride in the place. Given the fact that the geography of the Big 12 has changed, there are East Coast teams in the Big 12. Cincinnati's close to you now. I do think this job is probably better than it was when Neal Brown took it, and definitely better than it was when NIL started, because that's where Neal Brown kind of had his struggles, and I'm not sure any coach was going to be able to overcome that. The next coach is not going to have to deal with that in as big of a way. Obviously, NIL supplementing revenue share is going to be a thing everywhere. But if you evaluate well with the revenue sharing money that you're going to be able to use as a power conference program, you can win in the Big 12. You can win the Big 12 at West Virginia. So in a second, we're going to talk about who might be able to do it at West Virginia. But first, let me tell you about PrizePicks, best daily fantasy game in America. Download the app. Use the code STAPLES, play $5, get $50 instantly. You know, we got college football conference championship games coming this week. They'll get the board populated for that probably starting about Wednesday. But you can play PrizePicks pretty much any time because they've got the NFL, they've got college basketball, they've got the NBA, Monday Night Football coming up. Bo Nix versus Jameis Winston on Monday Night Football. The way you do PrizePicks is you pick in squares. You pick at least 2. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. So, for instance, with Denver-Cleveland on Monday night, you pick Bo Nix. You're deciding, is he going to throw for more than 224.5 yards or less than? Is Myles Garrett going to terrorize him, or is he going to run away from Myles Garrett and complete a few passes? Or is Jameis Winston going to eat a W because he threw for more than 230.5 passing yards? We will find out. Download the app PrizePicks. Use the code Staples. Play $5, get $50 instantly. All right, Ari, let us talk about who might be in line to get this job at West Virginia. Let's get the legacy sentimental choices out of the way first, because these are the names that'll pop in the headline. But
Nick Saban,
West Virginia native.
Is that where you were going?
Good thinking. I think he likes his job now. I think he's good on game day with West Virginia grad Pat McAfee. But
Nick Saban, in theory, though,
well, obviously,
go back home, low leverage, low pressure job. Just
it's still a high pressure job. There are no low pressure jobs.
I'm saying in comparison to what is expected, in what he's accustomed to, it is a low pressure job.
Yeah.
Because you could win 9 games this year, and they'll make a statue of you in front of their building there. So, but go ahead. I was making a joke, but also would be the coolest thing.
It would be.
Yeah.
But 2 other native West Virginians, one of whom has already had the job, one of whom has not. Rich Rodriguez, who did a good job at Jacksonville State, who probably should have never left West Virginia for Michigan. If we're thinking, and then remember, he was going to take the Alabama job before Nick Saban got it. He was ready to roll and changed his mind and went back to West Virginia to coach Pat White and Steve Slayton for 1 more year, and Pat McAfee for 1 more year. And I mean, imagine if he just stayed there.
Yeah, so I have a hard time. Like, first of all, Jacksonville State's offense is really good.
Yes, it is
really fun to watch.
Yep.
I bet a lot of the
other
weeknight
Gamecocks.
Games. I bet a lot of these games, and I like watching them. And it's like when they get rolling.
Yeah.
The thing that I have a hard time with is that he was such a visionary from an offensive standpoint during his era that there was a certain advantage in the way that they played that does not exist anymore. Yeah. So it's like a lot of times too, it's like you can't go back home.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're not getting the rich rod that you had.
Yeah.
So, but would still be amazing and would be what a great story that would be. And you never know. He's done a pretty good job in this.
Yeah, they're in the Conference USA Championship game this week. So it will that's the thing, that this might take a minute, because I think a couple of these guys we're talking about are in conference championship games.
Yeah.
So it might go through signing day without having a coach, because signing day is on Wednesday. The other name, who's a West Virginia native, his name is gonna pop up, I think he wants the job, is Jimbo Fisher. I don't think Jimbo Fisher's getting this job. Based on the last few years at Texas A&M, I don't think I would hire him for this job.
Yeah, I mean, Jimbo Fisher is just an entire podcast.
Yeah.
But he wants back in.
Yeah.
What kind of job do you
Is he going to fund your NIL effort? Because he's got the money.
He's got plenty of money to do it. Yeah. But I don't think
you can do that.
If he were to get a head coaching job, what would that, if it's not this, then what would it be?
It's a good question.
What is he?
But I look at A&M, and I just don't. If you get the version of Jimbo from the last 2 or 3 years at A&M, that won't work at West Virginia. It won't be good enough. Yeah. And so I wanted to mention that, because I know that name's going to come up and people are going to, that's a headline you click on, obviously. But let's talk about some other guys who are coaching now who could be pretty serious candidates. I think Barry Odom at UNLV is a really good candidate, because this is a guy who went to UNLV. Look, Barry Odom was not a bad head coach at Missouri. He was pretty good, but not good enough, because Gary Pinkel had so kind of skewed expectations for what Missouri could be. And I think Barry Odom probably got fired a little early at West Virginia. I think he probably should have been given a little more time. He wasn't.
At Mizzou.
I'm sorry, at Missouri. Yeah. And then he goes to Arkansas as the DC, did a good job. And now at UNLV, he's got them in the conference championship game for the 2nd consecutive season. He hired Brendan Marion, who runs a fun offense. I don't know if Brendan Marion will be coming with. If that's the case, I know Brendan Marion's trying to get some head coaching jobs. If Barry Odom got West Virginia, could Brendan Marion be the head coach at UNLV? But the fact is, he seems to understand you got to have a pretty unique, fun offense. And he would
maybe at West Virginia, that's the blueprint if history repeats itself.
But the thing is, Barry Odom's teams always play good defense. And this particular UNLV team plays great special teams too.
Yep, absolutely. And it's that's the type of person. Are we sure that West Virginia's a better job than UNLV. I mean, it is in Vegas. All kidding aside, though, I think that one.
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think every other Friday it's a lot better job than UNLV.
So who else?
Shannon Dawson.
Okay.
Used to be West Virginia's offensive coordinator under Dana Holgerson. He is Miami's offensive coordinator right now. It may be time for him to move on and run his own show at some point. And we don't know how good a head coach he'll be, but he will run a good offense. You've seen him with Cam Ward. He works really well with good quarterbacks. I think, he could probably come in and say, hey, look, I've got my eye on these quarterbacks in the portal. We're going to go grab them. We got some rev share money coming in. Let's get this thing rolling. So I think that would be an interesting one to talk about. Trying to think of who else really kind of fits the profile. Yeah, not going to throw out John Sumrall for this one, the Tulane coach. We've thrown him out for pretty much every other job.
He's a candidate for everything.
But I think that's the problem. He is a candidate for everything. One another name I know our guy Pete Nakos has mentioned this one. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So Denbrock, remember, was the one who ran LSU's offense when Jane Daniels won the Heisman, then goes to Notre Dame. And if you watch Notre Dame's offense evolve as Riley Leonard has gotten more comfortable in it, I think that could be a really interesting one too. And then Denbrock has worked under a lot of different people. He's with Marcus Freeman right now. He's worked under Luke Fickell. He's worked under Brian Kelly. So he's seen a lot of different management styles. So we don't know exactly what his management style would be. But those are some names to think about for West Virginia. Barry Odom's pre-existing relationship with Ren Baker, West Virginia's athletic director, that's where I think that feels like the most obvious connection.
Yep.
But we'll find out. I mean, what would the appetite be for a Rich Rod return?
I'd be all for it.
It'd be something.
Be good for us.
Well, good luck, Mountaineers. It's a good job. Listen, you throw in some Tudor's biscuits, you're going to find yourself a hell of a coach.